Good afternoon. I'm Abe.
And I'm Frank. And today, we're adumbrating the second half of Chapter 22, The Ordeal of Reconstruction, in Kennedy, Cohen, and Bailey's The American Pageant textbook. Abe, can you start us off?
Gladly. A great conflict grew between the president and Congress over Johnson's approved 10% governments, which had passed stringent black codes. And Johnson had also further provoked Congress by 1. Vetoing Congress's Civil Rights Bill, and 2. Shutting down the Freedmen's Bureau. For the 1866 congressional election, Johnson wanted to secure a majority in Congress that would support his soft on the South policies. Johnson then began his swing round the circle as he spoke at various cities in support of his own views. Basically, Johnson simply accused radicals in Congress of having planned anti-black riots. Ultimately, Johnson's inept speech-making pushed almost all the voters to support his opponent, the Republicans, who won with more than a 2/3 majority in both congressional houses. Now, Frank, what kinds of principles did the Republicans impose?
Well, back in Congress, the Republicans now realized that they had a supermajority of a 2/3 majority over any opposition, as you pointed out. Now, this allowed them to pass nearly anything and overrule the presidential veto wielded by Johnson. However, the new factions began to arise within the Republican Party. The Radicals in the Senate, whose leader was Charles Sumner, and in the House, their leader was Thaddeus Stevens. Now, these radicals wanted to withhold Southern integration into the Union and fundamentally change the South economy. In the end, they managed to compromise with the more moderate faction of Republicans. Abe, what legislative approaches did Congress adapt to target the South and during Reconstruction?
All right, Congress passed the Reconstruction Act, which split the South into 5 military districts, each led by a Union general. This act also disenfranchised thousands of former Confederates. Furthermore, Congress required the seceded states to ratify the 14th Amendment. But the overall purpose of the moderates in Congress was to create an electorate in each southern state that would vote each state back into the Union on acceptable terms. This would thus free the national government from the responsibility of protecting black rights. However, the Republicans still passed the 15th Amendment, guaranteeing black suffrage, since they were worried that the southern states would amend their constitutions once they were readmitted. And many also doubted the constitutionality of the military districts in the South, since in the case Ex parte Milligan, the Supreme Court ruled that military tribunals could not try citizens in territories where civil courts were open. Nonetheless, the Blue Bellies, or the Northern Soldiers, remained in each southern district until Republican rule seemed fully instated. When the Blue Bellies left, government passed back into the hands of Redeemers, or Home Rule Democrats. Now, Frank, how did women respond to the slavery issue, to the black issue?
Well, those in favor of women's suffrage were greatly disappointed by the 14th and 15th Amendments, since they didn't grant women the right to vote as well. This was especially upsetting since female organizations, such as the Women's Loyal League, had worked so hard to bring suffrage to blacks. In fact, some feminists, such as Susan B. Anthony, had even campaigned against the 14th and 15th Amendments, since they wanted the franchise extended to women as well as blacks. Abe, did blacks take advantage of their new political position?
Of course they did. Blacks began to take advantage of their own new political power, exemplified in the Union League, a network of political groups designed to educate voters and campaign for Republican candidates. For the first time, blacks won offices in Washington, and black men, such as Blanche Bruce and Huron rebels, held congressional seats. Many Southern whites hated this and were further infuriated by scalawags, or Southern whites in sympathy with the North. They also despised carpetbaggers, or Northerners seeking profit and power in the post-war South. Now, Frank, did any groups rise to oppose the black suffrage?
Unfortunately, they did. The bitter and resentful Southern whites began organizing the terrorist organization known as the Ku Klux Klan. Through the use of torture and murder, they sought to drive blacks away from voting or exercising their rights. In one occurrence in 1868, they murdered or wounded over 200 innocent civilians. In response, Congress passed the Force Acts, which allowed federal troops to fight back against the violence and intimidation. Unfortunately, this came too little, too late. Abe, it seems like there's a fundamental disconnect between President Johnson and the Congress. Was this ever resolved?
Not really. So radicals in Congress set out to impeach Johnson by constitutional processes. First, Congress passed the Tenure of Office Act, which forbade the president from removing appointees approved by the Senate without permission from the Senate. Congress also wanted to secure Edwin Stanton's position as Secretary of War, since Stanton served as a spy for the radicals. Johnson fell into Congress's trap by defying the Tenure of Office Act and dismissing Stanton in 1868. Thus, the House immediately voted 126 to 47 to impeach Johnson. But Frank, was Johnson actually impeached?
Well, Johnson's lawyers argue that the Tenure of Office Act itself was unconstitutional, and therefore Johnson was innocent. I mean, it must have worked, for Johnson was found not guilty, though only by a single vote. They therefore avoided establishing a dangerous precedent for removing a president simply because of his unpopular decisions, and thus some good came from the congressional versus presidential battle. Abe, I'm getting bored talking about Reconstruction in the South. Was anything happening anywhere else?
Yes, actually at this time, Russia proposed the sale of Alaska to America for several reasons. First, the Russians had already overextended themselves in North America. Second, Alaska was furred out and therefore an economic liability. And third, the Russians wanted to strengthen the US so it could serve as a more powerful barrier against the old Russian enemy, Britain. So they sent higher law William Seward, the Secretary of State, who signed a treaty and purchased Alaska for $7.2 million. But the treaty became known as Seward's Folly, since American people at the time were anti-expansionist and focused on economics. But Congress still sanctioned the purchase, since first, they didn't want to offend Russia after Russia had been friendly to the north during the Civil War. And second, Alaska was rumored to be filled with furs, gold, and fish, and could later prove to be very profitable. Now, Frank, could you summarize the whole ordeal of Reconstruction for us?
Absolutely. On the whole, Southern whites despised Reconstruction, which they viewed as an upending of all their established social and racial systems. And, unfortunately, black codes and other such legislations made the job of properly bringing equality to the South a tough one, and one that our government still struggles with today. In conclusion, this chapter demonstrated to us the good intentions of the North, and the successes of equality exemplified in the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, while also showing how many Southern whites refused to allow equality, forming organizations like the Ku Klux Klan, or legislation like the Black Codes. Thank you for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe.
And comment down below if you have any questions.
We'll catch you guys next time.